Ladies and gentlemen, this is Austin from Ohio. Um, of course, we're going to continue reading The Secret Destiny of America by Manly Palmer Hall, but there were a couple of things that I wanted to address first before we continue in our reading endeavor. The first one is this little guy right here. This is HR127, the Sabika Sheik Firearm Licensing and Registration Act. So when I heard that this was something that had been introduced, of course, the first thing that I wanted to do, as I always do, I wanted to go and I wanted to read the bill. And I already knew what was going to be in it because I understand the agenda. But, okay, so it says here, sponsor Representative Jackson Lee, Sheila. So, Sheila Jackson, not sure if you know who she is, but she is a communist, in my humble opinion. And it was introduced, you can see a little tracker right there. Latest action, House, January 4th, 2021, referred to the House Committee on Judiciary. Usually, when something is introduced, the text would be right here. But all the information is here except the text. Not sure if they understand this or not, which they do, but when something like this or any bill is introduced, they have to provide us, the American people, with the text. In every other bill that has ever been introduced, when it was in the introduction phase, if you would go to it and you would start reading it, you would be able to pull up the text. But for some odd reason, you can't on this one. And the reason for that is that this is obviously a national registration and licensing. It's not just going to be for ARs, AKs, things like that. This is going to be for all firearms because the ultimate goal is to disarm the American people. First and foremost, because we still, to this day, have about 40% of the world's firearms just amongst our population. No government would ever try to invade or do things that they want to do with that many people being armed. So over the years, they had to go a different route, which was just turning our minds against the idea that people should be armed. If we let them get this national registration, it is a done deal. Well, it's not a done deal, but it's pretty much a done deal. As soon as they figure out who has what and how much, the next step is a total ban on all firearms in months and, well, weeks and months ahead. You're going to see an uptick in shootings, whether mass or whatever other kind of shooting, because they need to convince the American people to disarm themselves. So anything that has to do with any kind of crime involving a gun or anything like that, they are going to plaster it all over the national media. They are going to bring in the narrative that they have right now with the whole domestic terrorist thing, and they're going to play that up, and they're going to bring their normal division stuff. You know, they're going to bring race into it. They're going to bring probably sexism or how Americans are so terrible because we're not willing to keep people safe. People want to be safe, guys. We're terrible because people want to be safe, and we're out here, and people have firearms, and they're just sitting in their houses and stuff, not being used in any crimes. But just because this one guy here did that, that means we have to disarm 300 million people. That is what is in this bill. I am fully convinced of that. I don't even have to read the text to know that this is a national registry. Okay, moving on, because I really want to get back to reading. Came across this little number, greatreset.com. Normally stuff would have been on the World Economic Forum on the Great Reset, but greatreset.com. Okay, let's see what they have to say. The challenge. Why do we need to reset? Need, not want. Why do we need to reset? We don't need to reset. Let's get it straight here, right now, on this channel. We do not need to reset anything. They are the ones that caused this crisis. They are the ones that socially engineered the mass herds of people to believe that we do need a reset. Okay. The pause during lockdown created by the pandemic will result in a 7% decrease in global emissions in 2020. The United Nations states that we need a decrease of 7.6% every year until 2030 to avoid climate and ecological disaster. So, 2030, like Agenda 2030, we went over that on this channel. We went over the translations, what it actually means, not what it sounds like. It sounds good, of course, it's supposed to. Communism always sounds good. Socialism always sounds good. It makes it so attractive to people because it's basically getting things for free. You know, we all like getting something for free. I like getting stuff for free. I'm sure many of you do too. That is why it is so attractive, because they tell people you don't need to do anything and we'll provide everything for you, and everybody will share and it'll be a great thing. But here's the analogy that I like to use personally. And I like to think that I made this up, this analogy. Never heard anybody else say it. So I claimed it and it's mine. So, I mean, I don't care if anybody uses it, but I wanted to. Anyway, let's say that you and one of your friends, or, oh, my phone froze. What is going on here? Yeah, they've been messing with my stuff a lot since I started doing this YouTube stuff. Jeez. Okay, let's say that you and one of your friends or anybody in your family, let's say that you have a loaf of bread that you made yourself. You grew the wheat, you made it, it's yours, you can decide to eat it, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want with it because it's yours. And let's say your friend or whoever else has no loaf of bread. I will play the part of the communist regime. Here I come, and I take your loaf of bread, and I give you one piece, one slice of bread. And then, that's not all. I say that you are selfish. You are not doing your fellow man a service. You need to take your bread, cut it in half, and give it to the person that did not create the bread. while I have the rest of the loaf. I am telling you that you are selfish for having one piece of bread, and you need to give it away, while I'm sitting here with an entire loaf minus one slice. That is communism in a nutshell. They take control of all the resources. They take control of all the food, the infrastructure, the means of transportation, the waterways, the roadways, everything. And they give us a tiny little bit. And they tell us that we are selfish and we now have to share with the people who don't want to do for themselves, want other people to do for them. So then they take what we do have that they gave us in the first place, which is a tiny little bit, and they give it to those people. Thus, it kills the incentive of the working class, kills the incentive of people that want to engineer things, that want to create things, that want to go to work and do for themselves, because now you think that if you just do things for yourselves, then the government's going to come along, take your stuff, and give it to somebody who did not want it. They've crippled entire societies on this idea. Anyway, this means we need to maintain the same decrease every year as if we were living in lockdown. So they're telling us that the lockdown was a good thing because we weren't letting off these emissions, and it's Agenda 2030. They're trying every little angle Agenda 2030. The challenge is that as we emerge from the pandemic, the pressure to go back to business as usual will intensify, but people don't want to go back. Funny how that's highlighted. And who takes these polls? My subscribers in the UK, have you taken this poll? Only 23% of the UK public believe, following lockdown, advertising should encourage people to consume, shop, and fly like before lockdown. 77% believe it is the industry's responsibility to encourage people to behave more sustainably, like during lockdown. Yeah, behave more sustainably. You don't have any freedom anymore. You need to live sustainably so we can save you from yourselves, because we know best. Right now, we have a small window of opportunity to reset and shape the future we want. Yeah, they created that small window of opportunity to reset and shape the new world order. It's what it's all about. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this just tells you about the Great Reset, but we're not going to go on this. I have the book, and we are going to go through that. I did the table of contents in the introduction, but we're going to go through that book as soon as we're done with the one that I am reading right now. Do today from where you stand. What can you do? What can you do today from where you stand? Like 3 phases, Great Reset, whatever. The Pledge. How can I deepen my understanding? Like, yes, because they want you to think that you are an intellectual. And if you understand why we need this Great Reset, then you're smarter than everybody else. That's why you always see those people that think they're so smart in, like, public, Facebook comments on any social media, actually. And they're always like, oh, I'm wearing 3 masks now. I've seen they're telling people to wear 3 masks. And I'm just like, oh my Lord in heaven. Please come back soon. Oh my. Anyway, we are going to go back to the book. Goodbye. Excuse me. Just to do a recap from yesterday, we went over Albert Pike, Manly P. Hall. We started reading the prologue to this book here, And this book is going to tell you the secret destiny of America as seen by the people responsible for trying and eventually materializing the New World Order global communist government. Then we left off right here. After those who attempt to resist this motion destroy themselves, to cooperate with this motion to assist nature in every way possible to the accomplishment of its inevitable purpose is to survive. So, let's dig in. Thousands of years before the beginning of the Christian era, many enlightened thinkers discovered the will of God as expressed through nature in the affairs of men. They made known their discoveries in terms of religions, philosophies, sciences, arts, and political systems. These first statements are now the admired monuments of ancient learning. Available to men of today, they are generally ignored. Years of research among the records of olden peoples, available in libraries, museums, and shrines of ancient cultures, has convinced me that there exists in the world today, now that this is Manly P. Hall, by the way, that wrote this book, and has existed for thousands of years, a body of enlightened humans united in what might be termed an order of the quest. Yes, they are known to themselves as the Illuminati, Order of the Quest, because they are the enlightened ones. They are the only enlightened ones in this world, and that is what they believe, and they believe they are better than all of us, and that only they are responsible enough, smart enough to take control of the world, you could say. Anyway, it is composed of those whose intellectual and spiritual perceptions have revealed to them that civilization has a secret destiny. Secret, I say, because this high purpose is not realized by the many. The great masses of peoples still live along without any knowledge whatsoever that they are part of a universal motion in time and space. Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad are among the greatest names recorded in history, but it is not customary to regard the men who bore these names as statesmen or sociologists. Let me stop here real quick. Muhammad, he didn't come along until like 600 AD. None of these other men are the son of God. Jesus is the Son of God, the only name by which we are saved. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son. None of these other guys, yes, they are prophets. Yes, they probably knew a little bit, but a lot of them actually were involved in the mysteries and were probably tempted by the serpent. Jesus was tempted by the serpent, and you know what he told him? Get thee behind me, Satan. They are thought of as philosophers, sages, seers, and mystics, whose doctrines have no application to the political needs of industrial civilization. Yet it is men like Plato and Buddha who still exercise the most powerful force in mortal affairs toward the perpetuation and preservation of a civilized state among all nations. All of the great leaders of ancient times realized and taught that the establishment of a state of permanent peace among the nations depended not only upon the release of human ideals, but through properly trained and disciplined minds capable of interpreting these ideals in terms of the common good. Excuse me. Let me tell you their definition of peace. Their definition of peace is not the same as ours. Karl Marx said, "Peace is the absence of opposition to socialism." That is what they mean by peace. All of the great leaders of ancient times realized and taught that the establishment of a state of permanent peace among the nations depended not only upon the release of human ideals, but through properly trained and disciplined minds capable of interpreting these ideals in terms of the common good, communism. World democracy was the secret dream of the great classical philosophers. Toward the accomplishment of this greatest of all human ends, they outlined programs of education, religion, and social conduct directed to the ultimate achievement of a practical and universal brotherhood. And in order to accomplish their purposes more effectively, these ancient scholars bound themselves with certain mystic ties to a broad confraternity. In Egypt, Greece, India, and China, the state mysteries came into existence. Orders of initiated priest-philosophers were formed as a sovereign body to instruct, advise, and direct the rulers of the states. Thousands of years ago in Egypt, these mystical orders were aware of the existence of the Western Hemisphere and the great continent which we call America. The bold resolution was made that this Western continent should become the site of the philosophic empire. Just when this was done, it is impossible now to say, but certainly the decision was reached prior to the time of Plato. For a thinly veiled statement of this resolution is the substance of his treatise on the Atlantic Islands. One of the most ancient of man's constructive ideals is the dream of a universal democracy and a cooperation of all nations in a commonwealth of states. The mechanism for the accomplishment of this ideal was set in motion in the ancient temples of Greece, Egypt, and India. So brilliant was the plan, and so well was it administrated, that it survived to our great time and will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. Now again, we know the great work is world government. Philosophy set up its house in the world to free men by freeing them of their own inordinate desires and ambitions. It saw selfishness as the greatest crime against the common good. For selfishness is natural to all who are untutored. It recognized that the mind has to be trained in the laws of thinking before men can be capable of self-rulership. And it knew that the democratic commonwealth can be reality only when our world is a world of self-ruling men. And so it is from the remote past, from the deep shadows of the medieval world, as well as from the early struggles of more modern times, that the power of American democracy has come. But we are only on the threshold of the democratic state. Not only must we preserve that which we have gained through ages of striving, we must also perfect the plan of the ages, setting up here the machinery for a world brotherhood of nations and races. This is our duty and our glorious opportunity. It seems to me that the basic plan for the post-war world should be one solidly founded in this great dream of universal brotherhood. It is not enough to work on the platform solely in terms of politics and industry. The formula must express a broad idealism, one which appeals to the finest institutions of man, and one universally understandable by all who have lived, dreamed, and suffered on this mortal sphere. The world's first Democrat. Now, you have to understand, guys, when they say Democrat, they don't mean the modern version of Democrats or Republicans, even though they both work together. You'll see. The leader who had the first social consciousness in the administration of a nation was a pharaoh of Egypt, Akhenaton, born several thousand years too soon. He was the first realist in democracy, the first humanitarian, the first internationalist. He saw the duty of the ruler is to protect for all the right to live well, to think, to dream, to hope, and to aspire. For his dream of the brotherhood of man, he cheerfully gave his life. Man has passed out of the state of savagery and become a civilized creature with the development of social consciousness. Civilization is a collective state. In our collective type of life, the isolationist is a detriment to himself and a menace to all others. There is a great difference between isolationism and intellectualism. Development of the mind releases the individual from mob psychology, but it does not set him apart from the common responsibilities of his kind. A true thinker becomes a force for good within the group life. If his intellectual powers lure him away from the practical problems and values of this world, he can no longer make his contribution to the social unity. Political reforms are not accomplished by the people, but through the people. Behind all collective progress stands the enlightened individual's leadership. His superiority does not free him from common responsibility. He is the obligation to assume the greater burden of directing his vision to the well-being of all his people. Let us see how this works. We'll go far back to ancient times. Akhenaton, pharaoh of Egypt, throned under the title Amenhotep IV, is often referred to as the first civilized human being. While this may not be literally true, he was definitely the first man in recorded history to exemplify social consciousness in the administration of a great nation. Akhenaton, the beloved child of the Aton, was born at Thebes about 1388 BC. Like most of the princes of his house, he was extremely delicate as a child, and it was feared that he would not live to reach the throne. As the last of his line, the dynasty would end with him if he died without issue. For this reason, he was married in his 12th year to a 10-year-old Egyptian girl of noble birth named Nefertiti. During the childhood of the young king, the queen mother, T, ruled as regent of the double empire. She is believed to have been of Syrian origin, which would account for the many strange and un-Egyptian ideas in religion, government, and art which were developed during the reign of Akhenaton. Queen T, brilliant and capable, had recognized before her son reached his majority that in him were qualities more divine than human. The son became the actual ruler of his country. In his 18th year, his reign extended for 17 years. So you guys can see just by the language here that where he says that the mother saw in her son something more divine than human, because they believe that man is as God and can be as God, just like Lucifer told Eve. You just got to keep in mind the whole time that when they say good, they're talking about Lucifer. When they say evil, they're talking about our Father. Akhenaton had been ruler of Egypt only about 2 years when he opposed his will to the priesthood of Amun-Ra. By attacking the oldest and most firmly established of all Egyptian institutions, the young pharaoh created legions of enemies and brought down upon himself the wrath of the religion of the state. He could scarcely have chosen a surer way of complicating the problems of his life. In the midst of this conflict, he proclaimed a new spiritual dispensation, and to escape his enemies, built a new capital city, 160 miles up the Nile from Cairo. His new faith was Atonism. that he named his city Kut-en-Aton, the horizon of the Aton, and dedicated the city with these words: Ye behold the city of the horizon of Aton, which is Aton has desired me to make for him as a monument in the great name of my majesty forever. For it was Aton, my father, that brought me to this city of the horizon. As the high priest of his new religion, Amenhotep IV changed his name to Akhenaton, because the older name included the word Amen, whose faith he had rejected. Charles F. Potter, in his History of Religion, says of Akhenaton that he was the first pacifist, the first realist, the first monotheist, the first democrat, the first heretic, the first humanitarian, the first internationalist, and the first person known to attempt to found a religion. He was born out of due several thousand years too soon. From his 26th year to his 31st year, Akhenaton devoted his life to the perfection of his mystical doctrine in the city which he had built for the ever-living God. Here he taught the mystery of the Divine Father and wrote the simple and beautiful poems which have endured and survived time. To Akhenaton, God was not a mighty warrior ruling over Egypt, speaking through the oracles of his priests. He was not a supreme being flying through the air in a war chariot, leading armies of destruction. Aton was a gentle father who loved all his children, of every race and nation, and desired for them that they should live together in peace and comradeship. Even more, God, the Aton, had created all the lesser creatures, whether birds that nested in the papyrus, reeds along the banks of the Nile, the dragonflies with many colored wings that hovered over quiet pools, and the lotus blooms. The Aton was the father of all beasts and fishes, flowers and insects. He had fashioned them in his wisdom and preserved them with his love and tenderness. Akhenaton, seated in the garden of his palace, spent many hours watching the flight of birds and listening to the voices of little creatures. He tells us that he found the Aton in all of them, and that his heart went out to them, that he gave thanks for the goodness in everything that lived. This was a pharaoh who traveled alone through the countryside, meeting the peasants, conversing with slaves, sharing the simple food of the poor. To the most ignorant man, he listened with profound respect, for in each of his subjects he sought and found the life of the Aton. He saw the universal God shining through the eyes of little children, beheld the beauty of the Aton in the bodies of men who worked in the fields. He could not understand why others did not see God in everything as he did. Like most of the great religious leaders, Akhenaton accepted the social program of life as part of religion. He could not accept the inequalities of birth, wealth, or physical estate as justification for men persecuting each other or exploiting one another. He saw every living thing having a divine right, a right to live well, to think, to dream, to hope, to aspire. He saw it the duty of the ruler to protect this beauty in the hearts of his people, to nourish it, and gave every possible opportunity for its expression and perfection. Religious intolerance was impossible among those who worshipped the Aton, and there was no room for political intolerance in a world governed by the laws of brotherly love. Each man became the protector and comforter of all other men, cherishing the dreams of others equally with his own. In his personal life, Akhenaton emerges as the first man in history to bring dignity and gentle beauty to the management of his home. He was the father of 7 daughters to whom he was completely devoted, and in his speeches and public pronouncements always referred to Queen Nefertiti as my beloved wife. It was usual for the pharaohs to cause themselves to be depicted in great stone carvings upon the walls of their palaces. They were represented as majestic figures, crowned and sceptered, They were shown either seated on the thrones or wielding their weapons against their foes. Akhenaton was the only pharaoh in the history of Egypt who chose to be depicted with his arm about his wife, with his little daughters playing about and seated on his lap. As with the passing years, the health of the pharaoh grew worse. The opposition of the priesthood of Amon-Ra grew greater, and his reign was complicated by invasions by the Hittite nations. The governors of various provinces pleaded with him for help, but Akhenaton would not send armies. The dreamer king saw his lands pillaged, his cities conquered, but he would not kill his enemies. They too were children of the Aton. Akhenaton died in his 36th year at the altar of the Aton in the temple of the faith he had created. When his mummy case was found, the following prayer to the Aton was discovered, inscribed on golden foil beneath his feet. I breathe the sweet breath which comes forth from thy mouth. I behold thy beauty every day. Give me thy hands holding thy spirit, that I may receive it and be lifted by it. Call thou upon my name unto eternity, and it shall never fail. In the words of the great Egyptologist, Professor Breasted, there died with him such a spirit that world had never seen before. Akhenaton was the first man in history who dared to dream of the brotherhood of men, cheerfully gave his life and the empire for that dream. He is indeed the beautiful child of the living Aton, whose name shall live forever and ever. Westward ocean traveled to the earthly paradise. From Plutarch's description of voyages, it can be calculated that our great continent in the Western Hemisphere was visited by the ancient Greeks. They not only reached our shores, but explored part of the Great Lakes area. Under a thin veil of symbolism, they perpetuated in mythology their knowledge of our land, which they called blessed. The area was anciently set apart from coming generations in the great human experiment of the democratic commonwealth. Okay. They tell us, like, oh, Christopher Columbus came here in 1492. And on the Discovery Channel, they would tell you stuff like, oh, the Vikings were here 300 years before Columbus. When in reality, people were here even before then. People were here for a very, very long time before they started telling the world about the first person that came here. All this stuff is hidden that we're reading. All of this stuff is esoteric. They give us the exoteric, which means exposed. They hide this destiny because if people knew about it, they would oppose it. You only hide something when it's wrong. You don't hide things like good deeds and stuff. You don't hide goodness. No, you conceal evil, dastardly deeds. You conceal things that you know are wrong and people would not oppose. This has always been the case. Always. Always has this been the case. Excuse me. I want to keep reading more of this, but I really just want to talk for a little bit because I like to get on here and do that too. There's a lot of stuff going on today about people being all confused. They buy into the New Age, which the New Age movement is sad to say, but the New Age movement traces back to Ishtar and Isis and Osiris worship, traces back to Luciferianism. The New Age movement has a lot of different things mixed in with it, but the message is still the same. I am confident enough now to say this, but I too was once a victim of the New Age movement. When I got out of high school, I moved out of my mom's house, but don't take that to mean like, oh, I moved out when I got out of high school. Like, I moved down to my dad's for a little bit because my parents are divorced, and my dad was like, my dad believes that I needed to learn how to take care of myself, so he was giving me like bills to pay. He was charging me $200 a month to live at his house. I worked at a pizza shop at the time, but when I was there, I did a lot of reading, and for some reason, which I know why, because it's super, super appealing, I fell out of the faith of the Lord and into the hands of the New Age movement. The New Age movement, it all tells the same thing, that you can be as God. Humans are gods, they say. They say that we all have the power that Christ did, and we just have to figure it out for ourselves. And I bought into that for like 2 or 3 years. And then finally it hit me like a ton of bricks when I actually started to read the Bible for myself. And I realized the truth. And then a couple things happened to me like more recently where I believe in scriptures. I mean, aside from all the obvious stuff, like how I know we're in the end times with the creation of Israel, and that generation shall not pass away until all these things come to pass, and the earthquakes, famine, pestilence, wars, rumors of wars, nation against nation, people being self-righteous, boastful, lovers of money rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying his power. There's a lot more that goes into it, but we're definitely in the end times, guys. There's no two ways about it. A lot of people don't believe in this stuff here. You start telling somebody about the secret destiny of America, and they'll be like, there's no secret destiny of America. You're crazy, man. You're crazy. Well, all of this stuff is hidden, but it's in our face. You can buy this book. You can get on here. You can read it. Read it with me or read for yourself. There's a lot of stuff going on, guys, and that's why they have to rush to try to set up this new world, because they know their time is short. And once they get it, it's only going to be 42 months that they reign, 3.5 years. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months, and power was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Yeah. I think for the remainder of this video, I'm just going to talk for a little bit, so I hope you guys, don't mind that if you were actually interested in this. Actually, you know what? No, we'll continue for a little bit, and then we'll stop. I'll read to I'll just read this little part here, because this gets into the Greeks and stuff, because they take stuff from every religion and every culture, and they put it into the New Age movement is a combination of all that. Actually, the New Age religion was actually created during the time of Albert Pike and people like that, and they actually talked about how the 21st century will be the beginning of a new era of Lucifer worship. And they created the New Age religion. And Mormonism actually is part of that too. Joseph Smith was a Freemason, and Mormonism was a way to get people, mainly Christians, a lot of people converted to Mormonism. They wanted to get people softened up to the idea of the New Age. So what does Mormonism tell you? That man is God. It's a humanist religion. It teaches you that Mormons will tell you, like regular Mormons on the street, they'll tell you that they believe in God and this and that. And they'll tell you about the tiers of purgatory and of heaven and all this stuff. But the reality is, Joseph Smith was a Mason involved in creating the New Age religion through Mormonism. And they wanted to get people softened up to the idea to where now the New Age is something that is very, very attractive to people. For some reason, and I was a victim of it too, so I can say this, you're drawn to it because it sounds so good, and they teach you about being a light being, and they teach you about how you too have the power of God, and you can become God, and we can reach Christ consciousness is what they call it. We can all be Christ. Well, that's what Masonry teaches also. Man can become God. Yeah, this stuff is pretty deep, guys. It's very deep. And it gives you a headache reading a lot about it. And I want to do a video on current events soon. But I wanted to come on here today just to like read a little bit more of this so we can get an understanding of this kind of stuff. But it's really a lot to go over, and oh man, my cigarette went out. That's what I do. I talk all the time, and this happens. I also want to take this time to appreciate everybody that's in here. You guys are very, very nice people, the people that have commented. I appreciate your support, and I hope to continue to do this for a while, because I really want to keep exposing these people for who they are. And I'm really hoping that people don't fall into the lie, you could say, fall into wanting the New World Order as the only solution to the, quote, problems that we all face. Like, they believe that man can't be trusted to rule himself. Which, yeah, we can. I see people all the time. Like, for instance, last summer, there was some guy was coming from like a couple towns over in West Virginia, and he was driving through, and he was like, something about his girlfriend killed himself, so he was like going insane, and he was riding around with a shotgun, and he was like shooting up in the air, and the cops were chasing him and stuff, and he was coming over to Ohio. And when that was going on, they put out like a warning and alerts and stuff, and they were talking about like, oh, go in your house and stay in your house because we don't know where this guy's gonna go and this and that. Oh man, you should have seen. You should have seen the mentality of the people. They kept getting online on social media, and they were like, are we safe yet, guys? Are we safe? Can we come out? Without police, our lives would be in chaos. You mean to tell me that you cannot live your life responsibly and not be a savage if there were no police? You're telling me that if there were no police, you would all of a sudden just start acting crazy? If that's the case, then we truly do not deserve freedom. Because that's what freedom is. The ability to rule yourself, to be responsible. Freedom comes with responsibility. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you shouldn't. How many times have you all heard that? I'm 27 years old and I know this. People my age, they're out partying, drinking, having sex with God knows how many people. Being totally irresponsible. Not a care in the world about anything that's going on right now. If you try to tell them about this stuff, they're like, gee, man, lay off. Bro, just smoke this weed, man, lay off. Like, man, come on. And when that was going on with that guy, like, running around with that shotgun, the first thing I did was I went in the house and I got my pistol and I put it in my back, and I was like, okay, let's wait for this guy. If he comes out here and he starts shooting off a shotgun, we're going to have a problem. It's another thing I wanted to talk about, actually. Get comfortable here. I saw Restore the Republic 76, Tim, put a video earlier about a line outside of Cabela's. And everybody knows there's been an ammo shortage. People are buying ammo like crazy. This whole year, actually. Well, and 2020, of course. Out there, even at my local gun shops, you call and you say, hey, do you got 5.56? And they're like, oh, no, man, this guy just came in and bought the last 1,000 rounds. But if you don't have any ammunition, get it when you can. Don't put it off, please. Do not put it off. Your community may depend on you one day. Soon, actually. Then you got the notion of people out here, whenever you start talking about stuff like that, and they're like people at work, I was so excited whenever I bought my rifle. I was telling everybody, because that's the way I am. I was running around, I was like, oh man, I just got this new rifle. Want to see a picture of it? A couple years ago. And I forgot who I was talking to, and most people were just like, oh, you got a rifle? We got to watch this guy. He might... And that pissed me off so bad. That made me so mad when people were running around saying that. Saying that they had to watch me now because, like, dude, I've had guns my whole life. There's a picture of me at 12 years old with a 12 gauge. Getting ready to go hunting. And my dad watches my videos, so Dad, you remember that, don't you? I actually showed you that picture recently. It's just crazy, man. It's just crazy world we're living in right now. If you go and buy a gun, people are talking about, like, oh, what do you need that for? Like, right now, nothing. Don't need it for anything. I hope I never need it. But same thing as a fire extinguisher. I don't need my fire extinguisher right now, but do I have one? You bet your ass. Because obviously my house isn't on fire. But if it does catch on fire, I'm prepared to extinguish the flame. Same concept, guys. Same concept. If you're listening and you don't have any weapons, please go get them while you can, because pretty soon they're going to come out and they're just going to say, look, no more guns for anybody. And then you ain't going to be able to get it. And I hear people talking, but I think it's my neighbors. Oh yeah, they're across the street. Yeah, so there is an ammo shortage, of course. People are buying it like crazy, but also they are starting to buy up the manufacturers for firearms and ammunition. That's another way that they can take out the Second Amendment. They buy up the manufacturers and they shut them down. Boom. Done. Eventually we'll probably do a video on optimal weapons, what weapons you should have. I'm not going to show anybody what I have, because I don't want anybody out there really knowing that. I mean, you guys, of course, like, you're understandable, and you know what's going on, and you know that people should have weapons and stuff, but I mean, like, for everybody else, because I just don't need to be having that stuff, that kind of flack there, because you know how it is nowadays. But yeah, we'll do something on weapons, how to properly care for them, how to properly store them, how to, and I'm not talking about a safe. If you have a gun, I mean, I understand people want to have, like, their weapons in a safe. And, like, if they have kids and stuff, like my boss, he has grandkids that come over, so he puts his weapons in a safe. I understand that, but there's something simple you can do when you have children. First, teach them about guns. I started learning about guns when I was very young. And Dad, you can comment if you're watching this. I started learning about guns when I was super young, and I've had weapons my whole life. I know how to properly store them. I knew what they did by, like, age 10. I knew not to mess with them. I knew not to ever touch the trigger. I knew that you don't point them at anybody unless you're willing, or anything unless you're willing to destroy it. I knew that you should store them in a nice, cool place, not in humid places or super hot places, because, well, you can actually ruin your ammunition like that. I don't care what anybody says, I've done it. I've ruined ammunition like that before. But it's my belief that everybody should at least have one rifle, one pistol, at least. Or if anything, just have one. One of anything. And at the very least, you should have 100 rounds. At the very, 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 very least. Now, I know 100's not that much, but it's better than nothing. But ideally, you should just keep buying and keep buying and keep buying, because you can never have too much ammo. Or magazines. Yeah, get some magazines too, because that's also important. And don't listen to people when they tell you that, oh, if you keep your magazines loaded, it can ruin your springs. Never have I had that happen. Ever. And the most important rule of having guns is never, ever, ever get rid of them. In order for us to remain free, we have to have them. You have to. You're a human being, and you have a right to defend yourself from other human beings who are trying to hurt you or your family. We are all equals by birth, and that's one of the main things. Everybody has a right to this earth. Everybody has the right to defend the life that they were given through no fault of their own. And if you take away all the titles and all the crap that they have out there now, like, oh, this and that person's better than this person because this person is a CEO in a mega corporation and this person is a homeless guy, doesn't make any one of them better than the other. In fact, some of the best people ever are poor people. Poor people understand what it's like to have nothing, of course. One time I was down where my dad lives. It's actually called Wheeling Island because it's like an island in the middle of the Ohio River. It's pretty cool. And there's homeless people that sit down there and stuff, and they get their signs and whatnot, and they say, like, oh, I'm a veteran, or this and that, or I'm homeless, or this happened. I remember giving this one homeless guy, I gave him two $10 bills, and he gave both of them to the woman across the street who was doing the same thing he was doing. And I never did ask him why he did that, but he was just a good person, I believe.